Alright, so here is my finished car lighting. And I will go through and explain how I lit this. For those that aren't in the class right now, I found this model off of Blend Swap, I believe it's .com, and then I took it and I cleaned it up and renamed it and kind of set the scene up so that it was a little bit easier to work with. So let me open up the starting point. Okay, so when you first get the scene, this is what you have. You just have a car, you don't have a light, you don't have a camera, and you don't have a background. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a camera. And just in object mode, Shift A, add camera. And by default, it will add it wherever the 3D cursor is. And then it'll also add it in the direction that the 3D view is looking. To position my camera, I'm just going to orbit my 3D view to get close to what I want. I'll say something like that maybe. And then if I go to View, Align View, Align Active Camera to View, which the shortcut is Control-Alt, number pad 0, that'll pop the camera right there. Now the camera's a little bit close, so what I can do, if I hit N to bring up my properties in my 3D view, I've got this Lock Camera to View. And now what I can do is I can navigate my 3D view normally, and the camera will follow along my view. So the scroll wheel will zoom in and out. If I do Shift, middle click, and drag, I can pan around. And if I, whoa, didn't mean to do that. And if I just middle click and drag, I can orbit the camera around and get it exactly where I want it. So I will position it, let's say, we'll go with like that, and I'll turn off lock camera to view so I can move my view around normally again. And also let me turn on my screencast keys and move the position up top so you can see it over your monitors. Okay, so I've got my camera set where I want it. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my workspace so that it's easier for me to work, especially on this monitor. When I'm recording, it's a bit of a small screen. So I'm going to collapse the timeline. I don't need that. I'm not doing any animation. And I'm going to split the view from the top. And I'm going to turn the top into my node editor. When I light the car, I'm going to be using emission materials, so I'll be working in the node editor a bit. And then on the bottom section, I'm going to split this again in half, and I'm going to collapse that toolbar. So this screen on the left here will be just my render view, and I will keep that just rendering cycles live. And then over here will be just my 3D view that I can work in and move things around in. So that's how I've got this set up. Over here in my rendered 3D view, just to review, change the viewport shading to rendered, or you can hit Shift Z to toggle in and out of rendered view. Okay, so I've got my camera set. I've got the car where I want it, which is just in the center. The next thing that I'm going to do is give it a very brief environment, and that's just with the cursor centered. I'm going to hit Shift A, add in a plane. I'm going to rename this to ground. I'm going to tab into edit mode and scale it up by 20. So now I've just got a place, and you can see it live update in my rendered view. Okay, so I'm happy with my ground. I'm happy with my car. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my world settings. If I go over here in my properties panel, click on the globe, that's my world settings, which is the overall environment. and I'm going to click Use Nodes. By default, it's this gray color with a strength of 1. The strength refers to how much the world influences the lighting of the scene, the ambient light. So I can change the color if I want the world to be green. You can see it makes everything this ambient green because I don't have any lights in the scene yet. And if I add just temporarily, if I add let's say a point lamp and move it up, you can kind of see how the green from the world is interacting with the white from the lamp. But I don't want that. I'm just going to make it completely black because I don't want to worry about any world lighting. Although actually, first let me show you what Henry did with the environment lighting and the environment texture. If you remember last week, I showed you Creative Commons search.creativecommons.org. And if you search for equirectangular, and search Flickr because it's a good resource, you've got all of these different equirectangular images. And you can find one that you like. This is the one that Henry used. You can do night scenes, dusk scenes. This appears to be a mall. There's a train station. Choose one that you like, and oh, this looks nice. Choose this one, and I will, oops, where'd it go? Download all sizes. Ooh, that's a big image. Choose the original and save the image as, we'll call it Lakeside. Actually, we'll call it _Lakeside, and I'll save it to my desktop. Okay, now that I've got that downloaded, I've got my background settings. I changed, remember I clicked Use Nodes, and now I go up to my node viewer, or my node editor, and if I click on this globe here, that's going to access my world texture settings or material settings. So I've got this world output node, and I've got my background node, which is what it's an input. So I can change this color here. Again, I can make it green if I want to, or red, or whatever. But what I can also do, if I hit Shift A, I can add in a texture, environment texture. Okay. You can also add that down here at the Add menu. You've got all of your different node options available here as well. So I've got that. Now I can open up my image, which is on my desktop, =Lakeside. Open image. Now, nothing happens yet. I have to connect this node to my background node, and I've got the color to color, so match up the yellow node to the yellow node, and this is the result. If I maximize my view by hitting Shift Space, I can rotate around and see that there is this sunset lakeside scene being mapped to the world, and that is in turn influencing the lighting of my car. And it's not uncommon for people to light their scenes just with this, with no actual light objects or mission objects, just lighting the world to show off a particular object or model. So that's one way that you can do it. Minimize that again with Shift Space. Also, while I think of it, I'm going to change my samples. So I want my preview to be, we'll go with 100, and my render, we'll move that to 1,000. Okay, go back to my material settings. I'm going to delete my point lamp. I don't want it anymore. And I'm going to delete my environment texture because I don't want that anymore either. And now my scene is completely black because I have no light and no ambient lights anywhere in the world. So now I'm going to add a light. My 3D cursor is still centered. I'm going to add in a plane, add mesh plane. And I'm going to go to side view, hit 5 to go into orthographic. And I'm going to move it up along the z-axis to above the car a little bit. Now I'm going to go to my material settings, add a new material, and remember I'm in Cycle's render engine. So if you're by default you might be in Blender Render, make sure you're in Cycles because the options will be very different if you're not. And then in my node editor I'm going to go back to my materials view, which is this cube right down here, and I can see I've got my material output and my diffuse shader. And again, these nodes reflect everything that's in my materials properties panel here on the side. So what I want to do, I can delete the diffuse node by just selecting it and hitting X, and then I'm going to add in a shader emission, and I'm going to link the emission to the surface output. And now you can see my scene has light. Now I've got two different options here. I have color and I have strength. These are fairly straightforward. I'll bump the strength up to maybe 5, and then color, if I want to adjust the color, it works the way you would expect. But I don't want to adjust the color. Okay, so I've got my first light in there. I want to make it a bit larger, so I'm going to, in edit mode, I'm going to scale it up a bit. Say something like that. And then I'm going to, inside view, I'm going to duplicate it, Shift D, and move it over to the front of the car and rotate it. Okay. Now I want this front light to be a little bit different than my overhead light. And right now, if I just change the, say I change the strength, it's going to change the strength on both lights. And that's because they're both using the same material. And that's indicated right here. And actually, let me change my material name to light_top. Okay. So both lights, if I select them both, they're both using light top. And you can see this number 2 next to the material name. That's telling me that that material has 2 users. So if I select my front light and click on the 2, it's going to make it its own user, its independent user. And I can rename that to, call it light_front because I'm unoriginal. And now I can change my top back to 5, and it doesn't affect my front light. Okay? Now I'm going to do that again. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it. I'm going to rotate it around behind, and I'm actually going to go to top view, and I'm going to rotate it around the side a little bit too, I think. What I'm looking for is just a little bit of a highlight on the inside of this spoiler. Okay. So I like that. That looks pretty good. I might make this top light a little bit larger. I'll see some more light spilling down on this side of the car. Now, if you notice in the rendered view, this backlight is showing up in the camera. You can turn that off so that the light is still there, but it doesn't show up in the rendered view. The way to do that is to select that light, and then if you go into the object properties here, this cube, and scroll down to ray visibility, you can uncheck camera, and it'll disappear from the camera view, but the light is still there from that plane. Okay. Next, I just want to add some underlighting because I watch a lot of Top Gear and they always throw a fluorescent lamp or something underneath the car, and I think it looks good. So to do that, I'm going to hit Shift C to recenter my 3D cursor, and then I'm going to hit Shift A, add in a mesh and a cylinder. I'm going to hit F6 immediately to change my actually, let me go to wireframe view. Hit F6 and change my values. I'm going to change it down to just 6 vertices. I don't need that many. I'll do a radius of, say, 0.05 should be good. And cap fill type to nothing. I don't need to cap the ends. Okay. So this is my cylinder. I want to rotate it from the side view 90 degrees so it lays flat. I'm just going to move it up off the floor a little bit, and then I'm going to go into front view and move it over right about here. Okay. Now I'm going to give it a new material, and I'm going to set this to emission as well, and you can see it already starts showing up in my rendered view. I'm going to change the color to a little blue, and then I will duplicate it with Shift D, move one on the other side, and I'm going to duplicate that one more time. I will rotate it around the Z-axis, and then from top view position it right by the front tires. Okay. Now these 3 cylinders that I just created, they all have the same material, so I can adjust the strength between all of them. And maybe I'll make the color a little bit darker. Something like that. Okay. And that is basically how I lit the car. Just to get familiar with different materials. I used all emission materials. You can use in combined emission materials with environment textures and light objects. You know, any combination thereof will all work.